So this week is the second week of our trimester, and we are going to continue on with our Unity compositions. So this is part two. Last week you were to have done the drawing on the tracing paper with pencil, outlining your letters and adding two overlapping shapes. And essentially this week, this is what you're going to turn them into. So these are two examples from last trimester, one by Annie Peasley and one by Kayla Cruz. They both look awesome, and they both have really dark, shiny colored pencils to really give their colors a pop. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So last week it was about unity and pattern, which are principles of design, and this week we're dealing with shape and space, which are elements of art. So can anybody write in the chat box what you think this little image is a picture of? What do you see when you look at this? Yep, yep. So good. Um, I think it was intended to be the Loch Ness Monster, because you don't, generally when you see a snake swimming on the water, they lay flat. But like the Loch Ness Monster is often shown as with, having the head and the tail and some lumps and bumps out of the water. So we call this phenomenon of being able to identify an object, even if you don't see all of it, object completion. And it is an amazing thing that humans are able to do from a very young age. And if you took like a word and cut it in half horizontally, you'd still be able to pretty much tell what that word is, even though you don't see every single letter. And some of that is, based on your brain being so familiar with letters. And the other is the way they combine in the word. So even if you couldn't tell if a letter was an L or an I, based on the other letters around it, you'd probably still be able to see the word. So that's one of the cool things about shape. In order to do this assignment, you're going to need your completed Unity Part 1 drawing with the letters on the tracing paper, colored pencils, and a Sharpie. And it should take about an hour, hour and a half maybe to complete, maybe a little bit more depending on how quickly you work. So a shape is defined as an enclosed space with two dimensions, height and width. So if you look at this circle, the height and the width would be the same, right? Same with the square. But in the rectangle, it would be different. If we were to measure this mustache, we'd measure the width across and the height up and down. It's also called an enclosed space because it stays within a certain place. Like if you could create a rectangle with a line, but if the line didn't meet the beginning and the end, then it would be considered a line and not a shape because it's not enclosed. So there are two types of shapes, geometric and freeform or organic. Some people also call them non-geometric shapes. And then spaces, there's all different kinds of space. So space is the area above, below, between, inside of, around, and on an object. So this whole rectangle is filled with space, but we like to talk about the different types of space to help us sort of clarify what we're looking at. So the black areas in this image are labeled positive space, but a couple of years ago they decided that they would switch to using the words occupied and unoccupied because there isn't like a value judgment based on them. Negative space usually meant a void, but now it's called unoccupied space. So you can see everything that's black in here that represents the chairs is occupied, and everything that's white is unoccupied. Sometimes in a really cool piece of art, you can see the occupied and the unoccupied switch. So in the chat now, I want you to put in what you see here on the left-hand side. What is this yellow object? What do you see when you look at that? Thanks for the spelling, Gary. Ryan and Donovan, what do you guys see when you look at that object? All right, well, a lot of people do say that they see either a cup or a vase or a chalice, if you're being really fancy. Some people call it a candlestick holder. When you look at this image on the right, do you see something different? Does anybody see anything different in that one? Yeah, two people, right? Looking at each other. So this is the same object in both sides. It's just this one has it drawn realistically with colors and shadows, and this one has been reduced to pure shape. So you have a forehead, eyebrows, nose, upper lip, lower lip, chin, and so on. So over here now, if you look again, do you see that same face over on that side? So that's what's called a figure ground switch, where depending on what you're looking at, you'll either see um, the the white space as being predominantly the object or the black space as being the object. This little image on the right is one of my favorite images that employs this technique because you can look at it either as the black being the positive space or the white being the positive space because they're both occupied, right? They both have shapes. They're both bears hugging each other. I think it's just adorable. So if we go back now and we look at Robert Indiana's love image, does it look any different to you now that you're looking at it again in terms of face, positive and negative spaces? Some people see this blue background of the V as an arrow pointing downwards and it sort of pops forwards. And for me, looking at this whole image, the blue really sort of glows and vibrates. And so for me, that makes it become more of one of the prominent parts of the image. So a lot of artists play with shape and space. And in this image, I want to know, I'm going to put a poll in our, I'm going to put a poll for you. I want to know which image looks more like it's coming towards you. So it's going to be either the left or the right. Oops, got to spell right. There you go. So the poll should pop up for you on over near your chat area. Tell me which of these images looks like it pops forward, the left one or the right one? Interesting. So the one on the left got 3 votes. And that is the one that to me looks like it's sort of rising up more. This green square looks like it's really coming towards me. But there is no right or wrong answer. I just wanted you to see how the same colors arranged in a different way can really affect the way an image looks. So I want you to keep that in mind when you start adding color to last week's assignment. So what you're going to do this week, and maybe you've already started if you've looked at the assignment, I'm not sure, is you are going to take your sketch and choose one of the 2 overlapping shapes to work with Sharpie. So if you didn't draw these 2 overlapping shapes, make sure you do that before you start today's work because it'll be next to impossible without them. So in this one of the shapes that you choose, you are going to either color in the background black or the letters black. And you're going to do that for the whole shape except where it overlaps the other shape. So you can see here I've put a bright red triangle there to emphasize that is where this black shape overlaps that. When you've done that, you're going to come in and switch it so that in that little area where the shape overlaps, if your letters were white, they'll turn to black. So here the A is white, but it turns to black, and the S is naturally black because all of the background is going to be white. So for in this box, you're creating an artificial figure ground switch. My suggestions for when you work with Sharpie are to color just inside your shapes. Because if you draw with a Sharpie on the pencil line, it's going to make it appear bigger than it really is. Sharpie has a thickness to it, and it also kind of bleeds out a little bit depending on the paper you use. So try coloring just inside the shape. Outline it first and then color it in solid. If you have a little Sharpie, you can use that as well, like to get into little spaces. Once that part is done, you're going to move on to colored pencils. And depending on how many colored pencils you have, you're going to choose a group of them. I wouldn't try to do this with any less than 4. So you're going to switch over to the other shape that you have and choose a color combination that looks good together. I choose warm colors, so they were like reds, yellows, oranges, red oranges, yellow oranges, all that good stuff. And I started coloring, I put red on the letter A, and then I put it as well in a couple of the background spaces. So here's 1, 2, and 3. I also put a little bit of red on the B. Then I switched to the color orange, and again, I put color on the letters and in the background spaces. And I found it easier to sort of do this as we go so that you don't end up stuck someplace with all of your colors touching already. Then I added yellow and kept going until I had filled in all of the shapes. So again, I've got yellow on the letters and in the backgrounds. Some of these photographs, the colors look a little similar, but in this last one, you can see that this is a different yellow than that one. Then the last step is to work with what's left, which is the background. So I want to remind you again that we're focusing on unity with this. So you want to make sure that you're choosing color combinations that overall create an image that holds together well, that has cohesion, and that looks good together. So I switched to cool colors for my background, and I've got purple on the letters and in the background. So here's a letter, here's a letter, here's a letter. And then I switched and I worked with some of this beautiful blue. So I have the blue on the letter A and in the background. And there is green on the letter B and in the background, and so on and so forth until it was complete. So here are some tips for adding colors. You might have to go over your colors in different directions to get them really dark. This is a colored pencil assignment. I will not accept it with markers. So if you haven't picked up your packet yet, there's still 6 people from your class that have not picked up their materials packet. You really need to get to school in the next couple of days to do that. It helps to have a piece of paper underneath your image to soften it and cushion it. Like you can either put a couple of pieces of plain paper or a folder or a magazine or something. You'll be able to get deeper, darker colors than if you work on a hard surface like a table. Pay attention to your edges. Try not to allow white space to show between the shapes. And remember, background spaces should be all different colors. If you don't have a lot of colored pencils to work with, this is a neat little video on how to combine colors to come up with new colors. And I just want to draw your attention to this box where you see it's really pale, and this box here, which is a little darker. This is what we're shooting for, this third box on the right. We don't want to see any white showing through. When you think you're done, ask yourself these self-assessment questions, and then you can upload a photo. Remember, HEIC photos will not upload. You have to convert it or change your settings on your iPhone if that's what you're using to take pictures.